Ever heard someone quote half a Bible verse out of context? Ever read some crazy Bible claim on social media followed by a proof text without exegesis? Here on Proof Text Flops, we call out this nonsense for what it is. My name is Hudson Smelly, and I'm going to give my elevator speech version of why that verse doesn't mean what so many people think it means. Today we're looking at Galatians chapter 5 and verse 4, something you've surely heard before. It reads, "You who are trying to be justified by the law are alienated from Christ. You have fallen from grace." The proof texters argue that this verse rejects eternal security. It rejects once saved, always saved, because you can, they say, fall from grace. But here is what the verse really means and why. First, as always, context matters, and those who argue against eternal security often rely on proof texting instead of careful exegesis. The book of Galatians was written to several churches the Apostle Paul founded in the Roman province of Galatia. After his departure, false teachers arrived with a false gospel centered on Old Testament law-keeping, which Paul blasted as a counterfeit gospel. These people are often called Judaizers. In chapter 1 and verse 6, Paul said, "I'm amazed that you are so quickly turning away from him who called you by the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel." In Galatians, as in Romans, the apostle used the word gospel in a very broad sense to speak of how we become a Christian by faith alone, what Paul calls justification, as well as how we grow in maturity in our relationship to the Lord, what we might call sanctification. Paul relentlessly attacks this false gospel of works because you cannot become a Christian or grow to maturity by behavioral modification through a list of do's and do nots. Chapter 3 and verse 1, he said, "You foolish Galatians, who has cast a spell on you?" Some translations say, "Who has bewitched you? Before whose eyes Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified." I only want to learn this one thing from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law or by believing what you heard? Are you so foolish? After beginning by the Spirit, are you now finishing by the flesh? He tells you became a Christian and received the Spirit in response to believing. How would you think then that you could continue and grow in the faith in a different way than by believing and by the power of the Spirit? You see, becoming a Christian or being justified is a work of the Spirit in response to our faith, and so also is the sanctification process. Paul's arguments culminated in Galatians chapter 5, and so let's read the proof text for what it is. The culmination of an argument rejecting a works-based gospel and championing justification and sanctification by grace through faith. Galatians chapter 5 verse 1, "For freedom Christ set us free. Stand firm then and don't submit again into a yoke of slavery." Don't go for the false gospel. Take note, Paul says. Paul, am telling you that if you get yourself circumcised, that would be step one to embracing this gospel, Christ will not benefit you at all. Again, I testify to every man who gets himself circumcised that he's obligated to do the entire law. You who are trying to be justified by the law, what he means is you who are trying to be righteous, he's talking about the sanctification process, by the law, by law keeping, you are alienated. You are estranged from Christ. You've fallen from grace. Read in context, and in light of the flow of the argument that Paul began in Galatians chapter 1, there's really no mystery here. He tells his Christian readers they've been bewitched by a false gospel of sanctification by law keeping, and if they're going to embrace that, they're beholden to keep all of it. And having committed themselves to that, Christ and the power of his Holy Spirit in them will be of no effect. They're estranged. They have fallen. That word can be translated drifted away. They've been blown off course from grace. Of course, that's what's happened. They've embraced what they can do by their own resources. There's no there's no loss of salvation here, but there is the possibility of a Christian running off the rails because we can't live righteously by keeping a list of the rules. We have to have the power of the Holy Spirit. We must have God's grace enablement in our lives. And that's where Paul's argument went next. We must walk by the Spirit in order not to do the works of the flesh. And so that's the grace we can drift away from when we rely on our own resources to keep the rules. No one was in danger of losing their salvation, but many of them were in danger of stepping away from the only means in which they could be sanctified and grow in the Lord. My Christian friends, let's always do the hard work of exegeting passages in context with an eye on the structure of the book we're studying, the flow of the argument that the author's making, and what the words that most of us are reading in an English translation actually mean. Let's not fall for proof text flops.